This is Bill Moberly with Vic Linden on the 18th of November 2014, recording his veteran interview at St. Matthew's United Methodist Church. So Vic, if you could, please tell us where you were born, where you grew up, and how you came to be in the service.
Okay, well, I'm 88 right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I was born in Youngstown, Ohio. Uh, my parents uh, they came over from Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and I I had 5 sisters and my brother. Uh, I went to school in Youngstown, Ohio, in South High School, and when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, it made me mad. So I enlisted in the Navy, but before that, my mother had to sign for me. I was 17. I joined in Youngstown in
September of 1943.
September of 1943.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Great Lakes, and I can't remember the unit I was with, but I was okay. And I had a little problem with the things I had to learn to be a signalman, but I got through it okay.
Mm-hmm.
And from there I went to
What did you learn? What did you learn?
well, I learned I learned
Morse code.
Morse code. I learned the flags. I had to learn 65 flags in a bag,
Wow.
and each flag was different shape, different color, everything, but we had to learn them. And I had to learn the Morse code, the dots and dashes, and I had to do the light, but anyway, I made them okay. I went to Little Creek, Virginia, for to learn to be on an LSM. One night I was on watch, and we had a windstorm came up, and I kept sighting to make sure that the ship was in place, but it wasn't. It was dragging anchor. I called down the wardroom one time, and nothing happened. I told them that we were dragging anchor. I called them again and told them we were dragging anchor, but I got no response. I called them again. 3 times I called, and I got no answer, and we ran into another LSM. So that woke him up, and I didn't get discharged or anything for it because I had the documentation that we were dragging anchor. From there, we went to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa, Oklahoma is out in the boondocks, and we got off of that train and started walking down the street in Tulsa, and the people were flabbergasted that sailors were in the middle of their city, and the young girls were really good looking too. Anyway, we went and had a meal in a restaurant. Our captain took us there, and we had a meal. Then he said, "Okay, you got liberty now till tomorrow morning." So we had a good night and loaded up on the train next day to go to Texas, Galveston, Texas. We got our ship USS LSM 40, and we were okay, and we had a shakedown cruise, and we discovered some discrepancy in the whatever they had in the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So we were assigned to a flotilla, but after we discovered the discrepancies, the flotilla left us and went to the South Pacific. So we were there a week more, and they finally fixed whatever the problem was, and we headed down to the Panama Canal. We were tied up to another LSM and went into the locks. We went through all the locks, and that took 8 hours. We ended up on the other side, on the Pacific end. So we took off the next day and headed to the South Pacific alone, just the LSM 40. We made a zigzag course through the South Pacific Ocean, and finally got to Saipan. we loaded up with some Army tanks. We carried 6 fully loaded tanks on our ship. They were all tied down, and then we landed on
Borneo.
Borneo. We made a landing on Borneo, and our ship carried a one-ton anchor on the stern. And as we were going in toward the beach, we dropped the anchor in the back of us. We unloaded the tanks with all our equipment and personnel. We just left them go off of the ship. Being on land, they could go right on and take off. After we unloaded the tanks and personnel, we started the engine up with the anchor pulling us. The anchor was on an engine, and it pulled us right off of the beach and into deep water. And I can't remember all of the invasions. We made 10 landings with the ship. I can't remember them all by name, but they're written down somewhere here. And after each landing, we did the same thing. We pulled ourselves off, and they were in the Philippines mostly.
Let me ask a question. When you were doing these landings, were you under fire of any kind, or were you have second wave, or how did that work?
Well, mostly we went in at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
That way we had very little opposition. Mm-hmm. The one time it took a little longer for us to unload whatever we had on there, and we got some fire at our ship, and our captain said, "Flank speed," and we took off and get out of the way of the fire.
Now, just educate me and any future viewer of this tape. LSM stands for
Landing Ship Medium.
Okay.
We were smaller than the LST, and I think we were a little faster than they were.
Now, these tanks that you had on the ship, do you remember what kind of tanks they were? Off the top of your head?
Well, I've been watching television, and that Marine that does the talking, he knows the name of the tank and what they would do and everything. So, so I don't
Doesn't
know.
stand out. Okay.
No.
What else would you carry on a ship like that? What other kind of cargo?
Well, we carried beer sometime. We carried ammunition. We carried trucks and the personnel. Every time we took something, it had its own personnel. We carried Australian soldiers one time. We carried Marines. We carried Army. And all kinds of things.
So on the LSM, what was your job, and how did you do your job?
Well, I was a signalman, and I was up in the conning tower with the officers, one officer, and we had lookouts and things like that. And my job was picking up the lights and pulling the flags out and set them on a rope, and then we would come at there's words for what we did every time.
And what did you do every hour?
Every hour, I filled out the log. What we were doing, what the course was, what the wind was, how the water was acting, and all the information that the ship used. During the war, I was promoted to second class, and when I was in the Navy, I would send home an allotment to my mother every month. One time we carried 4,000 cases of beer. It was going to go to the Army. They sent 8 Army riflemen to guard the beer.
You remember what kind of beer it was?
No. No. And by noon, those Army guards were laying on the floor. And that's when the crew started. And our captain made sure that we didn't leave the beach that night. So he revved up the engine and said, "Flank speed ahead," and we stayed there. But the commanding officer of our flotilla didn't appreciate what the captain just did. So he said he wanted our captain to come to his wardroom that morning at 8 o'clock. So they kind of reprimanded the captain, but he didn't get any bad news. So he was an alcoholic, and our crew, some of the men, made a still and we had a still on the ship, so the captain had whatever he needed. Let's see. We went to one invasion. We went to Leyte Island in the Philippines, and I heard that the 7th Infantry Division of the Army was at the front at Leyte. So I went to my captain. I said, my brother is in the 7th Infantry Division. I wonder if I could get leave and see if I can go find him. So he said, sure, go ahead, just like that. I went up the mountain on trucks or jeeps or whatever going up there, and I get up to the top of the mountain, and there's some trees there. So I walked out from the trees. I was out in the open, and there was an area there about 300 yards wide. So I went out into that area. The Japanese were over on one side, our troops were over on this side. And I'm walking down, and pretty soon somebody hollers, "Get down, you crazy fool!" It's my brother. So I get into his foxhole with him. He got a .50 caliber machine gun that he was in charge of. We talked for a little while, and I said, okay, I have to go back to the ship. Why don't you come down to the ship one day and have a meal with us? So about 3 days later, he comes down and comes aboard the ship, and it's noontime, and we have our meal. We had mashed potatoes and gravy and pork chops and even ice cream. And he looked at me and he said, "You eating like a king." And I said, "Yeah, I got the right place." So we talked for a little while, and he went back to his unit, and he was wounded twice. He got 2 Purple Hearts. I didn't get anything like that, but we made it out. And Leyte, we left Leyte and went to an anchorage. We sat there for about a week, and President Truman dropped the atom bomb because we were loaded, ready to invade Japan. All we had to do was wait until they told us to go. We didn't have to go, and I sure was glad, because we heard rumors and stories about the mass of people that the Japanese had assembled to meet us when we came, if we came in. And after Truman dropped the second bomb, they give us orders to go to Japan, and we got there, and we helped unload the ship with the things we had brought up to Japan, and we were anchored next to the battleship, Japanese battleship Nagato. It was destroyed in the atom bombs that they tested later. And on our way back to the Philippines, we ran into a typhoon. The typhoon's name was Louise. I'll never forget it. For 8 hours, we rolled and tossed and bounced up and down, and in that typhoon, there wasn't a man sick on the ship because we were too scared. I mean, waves were about 35 feet high. The wind was about 180 miles an hour. And that was one of the worst things I ever went through. After 8 hours, we calmed down, and we ended up going in our way. But the captain of this APA that was leading us and changed our course for us, the Navy reprimanded him for changing course.
Stand up for a minute, my back hurts. Keep going, sorry.
Yeah. We went to the Philippines and anchored again in that area we were before. And I didn't know it, but when a Navy ship is going to go back home, the signalman makes a flag, a flag for each man on the ship. And they gave me the job. I didn't have a sewing machine. I had to sew this flag by hand, and it was only 53 feet wide, 50 feet long, 53 feet long. That was a piece of work, I'll tell you. But I did it, and we ended up landing at San Francisco. We spent the night there. We got Liberty. Our side of the ship got Liberty.
No, excuse me, just 1 second.
Yes?
I apologize. I gotta do something with the lighting real quick.
Okay. Is it too dark?
What, don't mind my reach, man.
I'll try to just,
California.
back in California, you came under the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah,
What do you remember about that?
nothing. It was dark.
It was New Year's Eve.
It was dark.
It was New Year's Eve, 1946.
So the next day we moved down to San Diego. And we were there for about a week, and we got orders to go to the Panama Canal. We went to the Panama Canal again and went across, got up to the other side. We went up to Savannah, Georgia. And from there, I got leave, and I went up to Maryland, and visited my oldest sister, Mary. Then I went back to the ship and got orders to go to the Navy Yard at Brooklyn. When I got there, they made me chief of the mess hall because I was a second petty officer, second class. I did that for about a week, and they gave me my ruptured duck.
What
And
did that mean to you?
well, it means that I was able to leave the Navy. I did that and went back to home.
Did you wear your uniform home?
Yeah. But I never wore it again. And to this day, I'm a little bit sorry that I didn't stay in the Navy. But things don't happen the way you want to all the time. So that's my story.
It's a good one. So, when you think back on your military service, if you're just eating your breakfast and you think about your military service, what is the most vivid memory you have? What pops into your head?
Well, all the way the military works. And like I said, I wish I had stayed in, but I couldn't do it at that time.
It's been a number of years since you were in the Navy.
Right.
When you think back on your service, what do you think about the time you served?
Well, the people that I was with, I still am in contact with a couple of members of our ship, and we joke about it.
And you're very proud. You're very proud that you served.
Yeah.
Say that.
The what?
Say it. Say it.
What?
That you're very proud that you served.
Well, I am very proud that I served in the Navy, and the reason I enlisted in the Navy was I didn't want to sleep in the mud. I didn't want to have bugs and snakes crawling on me, so I joined the Navy.
That's not a bad reason.
And I was glad that I did. After seeing my brother with his, where he slept in the mud, I didn't want that.
How long had it been since you had seen your brother when you ran into him in the Philippines?
Oh, well, we both live in the same city, and we visited now and then. Then he had cancer in his throat, and he couldn't talk right. He had a thing that he talked into, and he died, I'd say 12 years ago.
Well, I guess what I mean is when you went into the military, went through all this adventure, and then you run into him on the Philippines. You hadn't seen your brother for quite a while.
Right, yeah.
How long had it been, do you know?
Oh, I guess about 4 or 5 years.
Wow. Now, one question I like to ask the men of St. Matthew's that have served is, where do you, or what do you think your faith did to your service, and what do you think your service did to your faith?
Well, while on this ship, I did a lot of praying, and God helped me to make my way through it. He kept me safe, and at that time I was a Catholic, but I wasn't on a straight and narrow with the Catholic, the way they did things. So when I married Annabelle, I became a
Methodist.
uh,
A Methodist.
Methodist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you recall you'd like to share?
Well, when we were in Tulsa, it was a good city to be in, because the people just didn't know about sailors. They learned that night.
I bet. Let's see. Where was your duties? You were in the command area of the ship, or did you have another post that you spent time in on the ship?
No, mostly on the upper part.
Didn't you have some kind of a crow's nest or something that you signaled from?
Well, there was our ship had a circle in the upper part there, and when we had signals sent or received, I had to get up in a little metal square. I had to wrap my legs around that part so I could hold myself on the ship, and that way I could use my 2 arms to do the signals, the yeah, the semaphore, and that wasn't fun, because we would have to roll with it and just hang on.
And where did they keep the flags that you used?
The flags were in a bag, what they call the bag, the flag bag, and there were 65 flags in that area, and we had to learn them all before we even left the States.
What did this flag you made for the men on the ship, what did that look like?
It was just a piece of cloth, about that square, and it was all the same color. 53 feet. But I made it.
Did it have a design of any kind on it?
No.
Or the ship's number, or
No.
just a piece of the flag?
Yeah.
Okay. As a memento that the sailors all got from the ship?
I don't know what happened to it.
Oh, okay. Did you have any mementos you brought back from your service? Pick up any items, or?
I think I did take a pair of binoculars,
Mm-hmm.
10 power binoculars, which we used every day up on the ship.
Now you have a large number of ribbons on your sweater. One of them looks like an occupation medal.
Well, it could be the Philippines.
Okay.
I think they call it what is it when people?
Liberation.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Philippine Liberation Ribbon.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I got there are 5 stars,
Mm-hmm.
which meant battles that we went through.
I see. When did you get your Victory in World War II ribbon? Was that when you got out of the service?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Annabelle, anything you can think you should mention?
Yeah, would it be interesting for people to hear your schedule and how long you were on duty and how long you got off?
Oh, yeah.
And then you didn't say anything about reading the signals from other ships and passing them on to the captain, so maybe say a little bit about that.
Well, when we read messages, I had a helper. He was in the on the ship, a member of the crew, but he just got into the Navy, and we used him. He would write down what I told him the message was, if it was a code or whatever it was. Then that sheet of paper I handed to the officer, the one who did the codes and all things like that. And he took it and went down the wardroom and made the message whatever it said. And that's the way we worked.
How long were you on duty when you were on the ship?
4 on and 8 off. Just constant.
So the typhoon sounded pretty frightening when you're on your ship. What about the ship made it worse?
The ship made it through good,
It did? Mm-hmm.
but if we had what they called a well deck, and if one of the waves came over and filled up that well deck, it would have sunk us. We didn't want that.
Nope.
There were 10 of us in 2 lines, and the APA was at the lead. It was a really big ship. And
And talk about what he did. You know, you said he would have you all go back and forth that way, and that's what saved you. Where he led you through the storm.
yeah, well,
You need to talk about
he turned us so that the waves would hit at our back end, at the reverse end of the ship, and that made us go up from the back and come down, go way down, and that kept us going like that. We were underway at the time, but very, very low speed, just enough to keep it going. But it was scary. I thought any minute that we were end right there.
Now he had you line up in rows of 10?
No, in 5 and 5.
Oh, okay.
Two rows.
Mm-hmm.
We were apart.
Mm-hmm. And these are all the other
LSM, yeah.
Okay.
We would go down, and we couldn't see the other ship on the other side until we all came up even, and then we wouldn't see them again until they come back.
Gosh.
I just kept seeing, boy, I can see them again. Boy, am I glad.
One interesting thing, I think, is when we went over to archives
Mm-hmm.
and we actually touched some of the things, the logbook that he kept during the war. We saw all of that over there.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing.
Has his handwriting improved any?
Anyway,
All right.
I'm very proud that I did what I did, and I'm glad that we beat the Japanese. They were bad people, rotten people. They'd kill babies just to kill them.
Did you ever carry wounded soldiers on your ship? Transport any wounded, or?
I can't remember.
You were pretty much transporting troops to combat.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And, you know, once we left them, they're gone. We didn't know what happened to them or anything like that.
Did you have any interaction with Japanese aircraft at all while you were at sea?
The only thing I saw was a kamikaze pilot hitting an LST which was anchored near us. And in 2 minutes that LST sunk. Just,
Where was that? Was that in the Philippines?
yeah. Yeah, that plane just come over the top of the mountain. And we didn't know he was there. We didn't know he was coming.
And many times they train sailors in multiple jobs so they can do other things on the ship. Did you have a secondary job that you did, or any other responsibilities?
No.
I thought you did quartermaster. Didn't you do quartermaster?
Well, that was part of our job, taking the log and doing everything that we had to do.
I see. So that's part of the signalman's job, is to keep
Yeah,
the record.
quartermaster.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay. Very good.
yeah.
Why don't you say something about the 45 that they were going to put in the museum in North Carolina? Why don't you say something about that?
Yeah. In my life, there were a group of people that went to Greece, and they bought an LSM over there that the Greek people had bought and were using. After they finished using, they sold it, and these guys and women bought the LSM 45, and they worked on it very much. They cleaned up the deck and cleaned up the ship. And what they did was they talked the Marines into taking the ship at what?
Omaha. Omaha, you talking about?
No,
Mississippi River.
no,
They brought it back across the water,
yeah,
right? And they
They-
wanted to put it in a
it
museum
went up the Mississippi River
to the Missouri River,
to
Omaha.
Omaha, Nebraska,
Hmm.
and they were going to leave it in a museum.
Oh, nice.
But
And that year we had a reunion. Talk
Yeah.
about that. We had a reunion and we went out there.
we had a reunion in Omaha, and we went out to see the 45, and she got to climb up the ladders and everything. Like, she couldn't believe what we had to do, run up the ladders to get
Get your meal.
no, you get the meal. You had to carry the meal, and on when we had an attack, we had to run up to quarters. I can't remember the name.
Battle stations?
Battle station, and my job was always up at the top, and that was a long way running up that ladder. But we made it.
So the 45 was very similar to your ship.
Yeah.
And then what happened to it after that?
Well, they scrapped it.
No, tell it.
Hmm?
They took it to North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Well, they decided to take it to
Jacksonville. Jacksonville,
Jacksonville,
North Carolina.
North Carolina. And that's where the Marines said that they would take it and keep it, but that fell through. And so anyway,
But it was scrapped.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Unfortunately.
and the only pictures I have is what I brought with me. Did you get one?
I did, thank
Okay.
you. Yeah. Well, believe it or not, it's been about an hour.
Oh boy.
Is there any last things you'd like to say about your service or about any memories or anything?
But the Navy's my number one. The Marines and all that is something else, but I like the Navy.
That experience was very powerful, wasn't
It was.
Earned
Yeah.
a good memory or powerful image in your head. Well, thank you very much for your interview, and thank you very much for your service.
Okay.